Hello and welcome to the Move Well, Live Well podcast.
We are your hosts, Antonio Capasso and Dave Fell. The aim of this podcast is to motivate, inspire, and educate the masses, giving practical tips and golden nuggets on how to get moving and live a healthy and fulfilled life.
This podcast is for anybody who's wanting to exercise but struggles to get started or to make it stick. It's for anybody who's chasing goals but never seems to feel satisfied, or simply anyone who wants to live a healthier and happier life.
As a licensed sport and exercise psychologist, I use my knowledge of human behaviour and psychological theory to help both everyday people and Olympic level athletes achieve their performance and lifestyle goals.
I'm an online coach and I've built a platform through providing healthy and budget recipes and practical exercise tips to as many people as I can. I'm not the biggest, leanest, strongest or fittest coach, but I do pride myself in being the most well balanced. We want you to take away so many golden nuggets from this podcast that you'll have to eat them with milk.
Hello everyone and welcome back. We're now on to episode 8 of the Move Well, Live Well podcast. We've covered a load of different things throughout this season, but today we're looking at holistic health. I'm always a little bit wary that people tend to just throw holistic, or the word holistic, into everything they do or into any marketing tool. But hopefully we will actually clarify a little bit around what we mean in regards to holistic, and then also actually cover these holistic topics rather than just being like, yeah, it needs to be more holistic, man, and moving on. But essentially the reason why we want to talk about this is because you can be eating well, training consistently, and just still feel off. Like maybe you just feel exhausted, constantly thirsty, you're stressed, or just feel a little bit unmotivated. So today we're going to cover those other areas outside of just your nutrition or just your exercise and start speaking about how they can impact how you're feeling. Dave, I'm sure you've experienced this at some point in your very busy, very chaotic life that you're currently leading.
Yeah, chaotic's a good word for it. But yeah, I mean, super important. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about exercise, nutrition, and those are obviously two huge pillars for overall health. But obviously, without looking at the whole picture, and that's often things like sleep, stress, kind of having a purpose, all of these different things. Without those bits that keep everything in check, then often you are going to have a more difficult time with finding the time and the mental energy and all the rest of it to do the things that you want to do in terms of exercise and nutrition and everything around it. So it all goes hand in hand. So we're going to be speaking a lot about that today. And yeah, as always, practical tips for how you can improve your holistic health and yeah, overall lead a healthier life.
Yeah, amazing. So in terms of the main areas we'll cover when we're looking at that word, or what we mean by holistic on today's episode, what are those 2, 3, maybe 4 areas going to be?
Well, sleep is definitely one, hugely important. Probably, I mean, outside of nutrition and exercise, probably the most important factor in terms of leading a healthy life. Hydration, super important. Stress, and then linking it back to a little bit and about where you can obviously come in and give your expertise about having that purpose and, you know, anchoring that in psychological well-being, as we know our Tony loves.
Yeah. I think if you've been a regular listener to this podcast, but also I'm thinking about some psychologists I used to know when I was doing my training and stuff. They'll know that I absolutely just love purpose, values, and like having that, and like how you can tie them in to living that desired life and having that good well-being. So anyone that knows it well will probably be laughing. Of course, I've like managed to somehow pencil it into every single episode.
It's what he does.
But yeah, let's go on to that first point you mentioned. So sleep, right? The kind of coined as almost that foundation of recovery and performance, right?
Yeah, as I said, sleep is, if not the most important factor outside of our exercise and nutrition in terms of leading a healthy life. And young parents, for any of you or parents of young children, for any of you guys listening out there, you are kind of forgiven if you are not living up to these sleep standards, because Tony and I aren't fortunate enough to have kids just yet, but I know hopefully one day in the future. But obviously when you start raising a young family, that is going to be massively impacted by sleep. So you guys can kind of, you can take a backseat on this one and understand that if you're not quite hitting the requirements, that's okay. But for anybody else out there, you don't really have an excuse, I'm afraid. And it's super important that we are, being able to hit that sleep. So 7 to 9 hours is obviously the recommended duration. And I'm sure you guys have heard that a lot. And it's super important because even just mild sleep deprivation, 6 hours or less, can have an impact on us over time. It really affects our cognitive function. It affects our hormone production. It affects how we feel and our mood and everything the next day. So it's really important that we aim for those 7 to 9 hours. I mean, I tend to aim for 8, but also it's important to, if you do miss a night, that you're not chronically stressing about it too much because you can build it up the next day. And what we're going to be talking about a little bit at the end of this section is practical tips for how you can improve your sleep wellness.
Yeah, sleep is such a key one because the amount of times I speak to not just clients, but even just people within the fitness community, and they'll be like, oh, I went for a run, just felt awful. I don't know why, just so fatigued. And like the first question, I'll be like, well, how did you sleep? And they're like, yeah, well, I just had a busy weekend, and then, I just wanted to catch up on that series, or I was on FaceTime to my mom or a family member, and before I knew it, it was 11:30. So I've only really had like 6 and a bit hours sleep after a busy weekend, and it's like, oh, well, there we go, right? You shock horror. You're going to have a bad run because you've had a bad sleep the night before or after a busy weekend. I mean, that's also the classic pitfall that I will that I'll put myself in as well. But it's really crucial to remember that, to look at that when we talk about holistic. It's also when you're reflecting on how you might be judging your own performances, and then just to look at that stuff outside of it. Someone will be like, yeah, but I ate really good today, or like, yeah, but I've been really on top of my exercise routine. But then you're forgetting that, well, they're just 2 areas of your, I've never done that, but they're just 2 areas of your life that can impact how you're feeling. And then, of course, the first one to think about is that sleep. And it's always the first one to go, is what I find, is like sleep. It's so easy to push off the night before, and we forget about the long-term repercussions that's going to have. But also, like, life's going to happen. So, sometimes we just need to accept, okay, I've had a rubbish night's sleep. Today's going to be a little bit more difficult, but then factoring that in the evening and thinking, okay, maybe I need to just, I can't watch that episode, or I can't do this little bit of my passion project tonight because unfortunately I am behind on sleep. And if I keep letting that happen, the more the week goes on, the more drained I'm going to be feeling, right?
100%. And, you made a really good point in there. And, me and Tony are here to let you about how you need perfect night's sleep every single night, because as we mentioned, sometimes life gets in the way. You might be out for drinks or whatever on a weekend, and I'd be, lying to you if I said that I never ever miss out on my 8 hours of sleep, because absolutely I do. And that's just life. But it's obviously, we're just moving that needle, trying to get as much as we can, as much of the time as we can. And yeah, that's just going to have such a huge impact on your health overall, because as mentioned, it's recovery, it's mood, it's energy, it's how our hormones affect us during the day. Because, not sure about you, like if ever I wake up after a night of drinks and I've had less than my 8 hours of sleep, my hunger is through the roof. And that's not by coincidence. So when we have that less sleep, our hunger hormones are impacted. So ghrelin and leptin, and I always remember the ghrelin for go get more food, that is upregulated. So we're actually purposely, our body's making us feel more hungry, and leptin, which is leave food alone, and full, that's downregulated as well. So if you've ever noticed how you feel typically a bit more hungry on days where you've had less sleep, well, that's your body actually, it's this hormone production that is a little bit out of whack. So it's not just you, and it's important to note. So for anybody who's on a weight loss journey out there, and you're thinking, okay, so how important is sleep for that? Then that's just one example there about how sleep deprivation, even on a mild sense, can impact your hunger.
I didn't even know that, and I'm supposed to be a psychologist. So cheers for that, Dave. I'm going to be noting that down. Was it gremlin means go get food?
Ghrelin is hunger hormone, go get food.
Gremlin.
And yeah, gremlin, also a good way to remember it.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I mean, that's great. So as Dave said, we're not here to lecture you and act like your parent and be like, you need to go to bed, get your 7 to 9 hours. It is ideal if you can do that. And we also know when we start thinking about things such as circadian rhythm and understand that we have a sleep cycle. So it's every hour and a half you go through this cycle in sleep, which is why they suggest 7 to 9 hours, because if you wake up at 7.5 hours, you've usually done that, like, I think it's five, if I'm doing my maths right, 5 revolutions. If you wake up at the 9 hour mark, you've done 6 revolutions, right? And that's why sometimes you wake up in the middle of it, you can feel really groggy because you've woken up in the middle of that cycle. So it's something to think about. I'm not going to try and go into the science and pretend that I know all about it, but this is what I learned from another podcast I did when a sleep expert came on and told me about it. It was really interesting. So that is also why we hit that 7 to 9 hour mark.
Yeah, I think that leads us on very, very nicely into actual practical tips for how we can improve our sleep. Because as we mentioned, circadian rhythm is so unbelievably important there about regulating our body's cycle. So even on weekends, and again, this is not going to be perfect, certainly not for me or you, Tony. But yeah, just trying to get to sleep and wake up at the same time every single day. And yes, that includes weekend. So for me, I mean, I think I'm not a particularly early riser, so 7:30 for me. If I go to sleep by 11, aim to wake up at 7:30. Obviously, doesn't always work out that way, but that's what I aim for. So try and regulate that, and then that just really syncs your body up to the sunlight and getting in that rhythm, which is ultimately so good for sleep health.
Yeah, I mean, I have my weekday alarm set at 7:15. Just so it keeps me awake. Like, even if I don't actually have to wake up or get out of bed that time, just having 7:15 as my alarm means that my natural body clock is already getting used to wake up at that time. And it's a bit annoying on the weekend where I'm waking up at 7:15, don't need to be out of bed, but it's just really handy because it means I've still got that, that cycle going on within my mind, and it makes it a lot easier for when I actually do need to get up at that time. The other thing is, actually, for me, a big one is understanding the impact that caffeine and just caffeine in general has on me, because I learned at university when I was a chef at Pizza Hut, not a very good one, but I was a chef at Pizza Hut, and I realized that I was coming home at night just feeling super anxious or stressed, and then 2, just could not get off to sleep. And I realized it's because I was working until 11 o'clock at night, just slamming 5 coffees a shift. And of course, that increases your heart rate, increases the cortisol within me. And I was okay, that was a real rude awakening, proper life change, not life changing, but life learning moment. That I was okay, I need to quit and reduce my caffeine. So now if it's past 2 o'clock, unless I've got a really busy day, you'll very, very rarely see me having any form of coffee or caffeine, because I know that there's that half cycle of caffeine. So if I take it past 2 p.m, it's likely that it's still going to be in my system a little bit come 9, 10 o'clock, where I'm trying to wind down and trying to relax. So the first one for me when it comes to trying to aid my sleep and help me get off to sleep quicker is just cutting out the caffeine.
100%, and that's definitely a rule that I live by. Anything kind of after 1 p.m, 2 p.m, I'll either have decaf or just try and avoid caffeine completely, unless of course it's espresso martinis on a night out. Then sometimes they can be
sometimes that is really needed.
So yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, in terms of, obviously that's one thing to help you sleep. Is there anything else that you do in terms of sleep routine or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that is so crucial it's something that I'm trying to build in more, is actually starting to have a routine before getting into bed. Now, obviously the simplest routine, right, is going, washing your face, doing your teeth. That's one great sign for your body and your mind. It's actually okay, we're now starting to have to wind down for the day. So it's just trying to get myself a bit more of a routine when I'm going and getting into bed. Another one is that I'm terrible on my phone, so trying to reduce that screen time. And actually for me, and I think what people forget a lot, is I have almost my final check of the evening. So I'm okay, no one's messaged me, there's nothing self-employed, right? So there's nothing work-wise that I've missed. So I can almost shut that bit off. I've caught up with friends. There's no one needs anything urgent from me. Family, no one needs anything urgent from me. I can put that on do not disturb, and I can, I've had my 10, 20 minutes of brain rot going for Instagram reels. I can now turn that off and start winding down for bed.
Yeah, that's so important, and that bedtime routine is such a key aspect in terms of getting your body ready to sleep. Because if you have a consistent routine that you do every night, that's signaling to your body to upregulate the production of melatonin, to actually like make you feel more tired. So, turning off the majority of the lights in your house, obviously you still need to see. So, but maybe like instead of using the big light in the lounge or your kitchen or whatever, then you actually turn that off. Use lamps, so your body is actually getting used to. And as I say, whether that's brushing your teeth, it could be reading a few pages before bed or whatever it is. Just like you, I can be very susceptible to doom scrolling at late night in bed. So I have one of those app blockers. So after 10:30, I'm locked out of all my social media apps, which has been really key for me in order to get some extra sleep. And as I mentioned on a previous podcast as well, I'll go and I'll put my phone on charge across the opposite side of the room. So once I've done that and it's on charge across, I know that I'm not looking at my phone again before bed. And then I'm really kind of nurturing myself to then get in the mindset to go to sleep, which has been really crucial. Another thing, try not to eat too close before bed or to do any kind of form of exercise. But again, it's all person dependent because that's a blanket recommendation. However, there are some times where I do get in late from work or whatever it is, and then I do have a bit of food and get to sleep. But that's based on personal preference. The recommendation is not to eat 2 hours before bed. And again, try and reduce that screen time 1 hour before bed. Again, so you're getting your body ready. You're not having taken in any blue light. And as I said, you're getting that consistent routine going forward from there. Making sure that you've got a good room environment. So it's cold. Don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love being cold in bed, getting into a warm blanket, and then snuggling in. I always use an eye mask. I don't personally, but my girlfriend uses earplugs, make sure the room's really dark, and then going forward from there. I actually like to leave a little crack in my curtains for the morning. So that, again, helps me wake up, getting some natural sunlight in. And then, again, leave my phone on the other side of the room. When it goes off, I have to physically get out of bed, and then I'll open my curtains so I'm getting that natural sunlight in first thing.
Boom. I mean, loads of tips there, right? I don't think we'll talk about sleep too much more, otherwise I'm going to be like, I need to go and get a nap. And I'm sure our listeners are like, right, we get it, we need to sleep, and I now know what to do to help me sleep. But we spoke about caffeine, right? And I think another big issue that I know and experience with caffeine, especially because I take creatine, which increases the only downside of creatine that I have ever found and that research found is that you might be a bit more susceptible to cramp. Right, which makes me think, okay, I need to also watch my caffeine there, because we also know that in that holistic model that we're speaking about, hydration is absolutely key, right? And that's also probably why you need to reduce your alcohol consumption during the week. I'm not going to tell you not to party on weekends.
Absolutely. That leads us very, very nicely into the next thing that we're going to talk about in terms of hydration, which is, again, super important. Body's made up majority of water. Can you believe we are just squishy bags of skin, mostly made up of water? And even mild dehydration of 1 to 2% can have a big impact in how we operate in terms of our energy, our cognitive function, everything like that. So you imagine like we are an engine, we are a well-oiled machine, and you imagine that oil is the water. So it's super important that we're staying hydrated. In fact, I get all of my clients in terms of their daily habits to track their hydration. And again, blanket rule, 2.5 liters, but it does vary depending on how big or small you are. So if you're kind of over 6 foot, kind of a bigger person, you probably need upwards of 3 liters. If you're slightly smaller, then 2 liters might do you just fine. In terms of rules, I have a very clear rule that I set for me and all my clients: clear pee by 11. You're in heaven. So basically aiming for clear or straw-colored urine. That is the best indicative test of how hydrated you are. And for me, that looks like every single morning. And I believe they do this in the army as well. Wake up, literally down a glass of water, or 0 sugar squash for me is the absolute go in terms of staying hydrated, because sometimes, as I'm sure some of the listeners will I guess, accommodate with.
Relate to?
Relate to. I don't know why that escaped me so much there. Can relate to is water can be boring sometimes. So sugar-free squash for me, absolute goated, and always just having a bottle beside me when I'm working or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I I'm also a big advocate for squash or cordial or diluting juice if you're from Scotland, or I think maybe Northern Ireland use that as well. Yeah, I mean, I love water, but it's just I want a little bit of flavour, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, sugar free is what I need to get on top of as well because I just love squash. Yeah, hydration is absolutely key. I think it's so interesting, just especially if you're speaking around body image, you should remember that actually like the amount of like fluid you have in your body will also really relate to how you're physically looking as well. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, staying away from dehydrating, we can make you bloated in some cases, which is a bit ironic. But again, can give you blemishes on the skin and affects how your skin and, you know, if you're breaking out and everything like that. I'm sure we've all experienced how it feels to be dehydrated. Again, just using after a night out as a prime example of that. You know, crusty eyes, all the rest of it, wake up, just with like mild headache, all stuff like that. It's all symptoms of dehydration. So again, just staying proactive, making sure that you're getting in it across the day is going to be super important for that. I would always recommend filling up a bottle for that morning and afternoon of work. Again, try and get in a glass of water or something similar with each of your meals. Try and front load it in the day as well, so you're not leaving it all to late at night, because obviously that will leave you susceptible to getting up and going for a wee in the middle of the night, and that could impact your sleep. So try and get as much as you can and in early as you can. And again, obviously, if you're doing intense exercise, making sure that you're staying hydrated all throughout that. And again, clear pee is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, amazing. Again, if you want to build it into a habit, something that I've been doing for a while is my cup of coffee or mug of coffee, glass of water. So I'm actually making sure I'm getting both. And it's just like, again, that habit is now instilled into me to the point where, like, if I'm in, as I say, I've gone back home to see my parents and I've had my coffee, I'm like, right, well, where's my glass of water? Right, I'm being a bit too pampered. I'm like, Mum, thanks for the coffee, but where's the water? No, but again, right, it's just simple ways that you can start building these habits. You get in the association of, I'm making my coffee, I need to have my water, or I'm having my meal, I need to bring myself a glass of water, right? It's just simple ways that you can start without not even having to think about getting water into your system, because it's just become habitual again. So again, tying habits into, you know, that behavior change is so useful.
100%. Hydrate before you caffeinate, as the old saying goes. And just quickly on electrolytes, because they are all the rage these days. And for a lot of our listeners out there, I just want to make it super clear that probably a lot of you don't need electrolytes, or at least to be supplementing with them. Just a little bit of salt in your water or a bit extra on your food will be enough. You don't really need electrolytes unless you are training with extremely high intensities or in hotter climates or in a really hot gym. For some of you that sweat a lot, you may need it, but for a lot of you out there, just kind of having a bit of salt, but also just getting it from your diet, and making sure that you're staying hydrated is more than enough, because electrolytes can be expensive at times, and they seem very, very fashionable these days. But as a general rule of thumb, unless you are training with really intense, you know, bouts of exercise or in extremely hot climates, then you should be all good.
Got some hot clients, have you?
Hot clients. Yeah.
No, that's great. I feel like we've covered everything around hydration there. I think it's one of those ones that's fairly straightforward. I always think about the reels that go around where, like, the girl's like, "Oh, I've got a headache," and then the boyfriend's like, "Oh, you've drunk water today."
That is true, though.
It is true. But yeah, I think moving on from that, especially into that stress management, if you are getting headaches because you've been dehydrating, it's always the first thing to look at. It's stress management. And for me, I'm conscious of just speaking about this as if it's just like, oh, if you're stressed, just be less stressed, because it's obviously not that simple. I'm like, I so get it. But we also know when it comes to your fitness and lifestyle goals, looking after your stress is a big one for actually, you know, that holistic wider model. And it's something, again, to really sit and reflect on very often in your life. If you're thinking, why am I so fatigued, or I just feel very irritable, or I'm not able to hit my goals, or my muscles feel really tense or tired, stress is probably going to be one of those key ones to look out for and to think about.
Absolutely. And just to make it very, very clear off the bat, we are not saying stress is a bad thing inherently because, actually we have evolved to have this fight or flight system, and actually short-term acute stress, absolutely fine. In fact, you can use it to your advantage. And, that butterfly feeling that you get before events or feeling nervous and you might be a little bit stressed before, not necessarily a bad thing. That acute stress and elevated levels of cortisol can actually help you perform in a lot of instances. However, on the flip side, it's this chronic stress, chronic elevated levels of cortisol. That's when it can lead to overstress, and that's when it can lead to impact in other areas of your life, and eventually it could lead to burnout. So Tony, how could people recognize those symptoms of chronic stress and that we'll start to have these adverse effects? Because as we mentioned, in the short term, absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, we do and should use it to our advantage, but when it's going on for long periods of time, that's when it can lead to those negative effects.
Yeah, so chronic stress and burnout, they tend to almost come hand in hand. Now, chronic stress will turn up first, and then burnout will be the result of that. So when we're starting to look at this, it is that idea of, are you like waking up or in the day, you're just feeling fatigued, right? So you've got that lack of energy. The other one is, are you feeling really restless at times when you should be starting to relax? Have you got that racing mind? Have you got something going on that's like making you feel anxious? Headaches, such a key sign, right? Are you getting headaches and are you finding it's because like your shoulders are tense, or is your jaw tense? Someone told me that to think about where your tongue sits in your mouth, but I don't know the full science behind that one, so let's park that one and we'll come back to it at a later date. But yeah, it's looking at, okay, am I finding less joy in the things that used to act as escapisms for me? Okay, am I finding that I'm actually disinterested in my original passions in life? And this is all signs that actually there is something going on that is causing you what we call this chronic stress that you aren't able to just shake off. Simply like going out for that run is no longer actually just giving you that release. There's something deeper going on. So it's something we really need to think about. And for me, especially with a lot of clients, and I've had a lot of discussions with physio clinics recently around REDS patients, it's that chronic stress is often what you're trying to mask with an over-engagement in physical activity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we spoke before around, dealing with setbacks, I think we covered it. All these episodes, guys, I'm forgetting which one we did. But yeah, when we're thinking about chronic stress, and I'm turning around saying, I spoke to someone recently and they said, I just I don't have the motivation. I feel really fatigued. I don't want to go out and run. And it's like, okay, well, clearly running used to work for you as a coping mechanism, or as that drug. When we think back to the past episodes about how it gives that dopamine release, gives you endorphins, right? Get that hit of serotonin. When we want it, we suddenly associate running with feeling better. And it's just like any other drug. We want to try and hit it as many times as possible. Exercise, not just running. As that drug, we want to go out and we want to get that as much as possible. But we realize, okay, it's no longer having that same effect. So we try and chase it more. But all we're doing is adding to that stress level and adding to our fatigue in general. Okay. So we need to actually think to ourselves, right, let's take a step back. Let's reflect and let's look at everything that's going on in life, not just looking at our exercise and saying, I need to get better at this. What's going on in our whole life, right, that might be causing me to have this underlying feelings of stress.
Want to become a stronger, better and faster runner? You don't need another cookie cutter program, you need a coach. Cooper is a coach in your pocket, and they provide real structure, real expertise and real accountability. And because you're a Move Well, Live Well listener, you'll get an extended 2-week free trial when you sign up and use the code MOVEWELL on the app. Cooper, not a plan, a coach. Definitely. And again, we talk a lot about obviously all of these things that we're mentioning, the exercise, staying on top of your health, having good social connections. These are all preemptive measures that we can use to prevent this stress. But what we're talking about here is it's important to recognize the symptoms of that chronic overstress and then management, because ultimately, if you're trying to outrun chronic stress, that's actually going to have adverse effects, right?
Exactly.
So what can people do then that's away from their normal kind of day to day to then help manage and reduce that. So then they're back at a kind of like homeostasis.
Yeah. So I obviously said there you need to reflect on what's going on, right? But I'm aware that everyone's like, well, great. How do I do that? And there are tips and tricks on how to do this. And obviously, like of course, I have a background. And I used to be a mental health lead for a charity organization for a year or so, and I do work with athletes around looking after their well-being. I am not a therapist though, so this is obviously things you can do when you're in that sort of surviving to struggling end of the mental health continuum. So if you remember a few episodes ago, we've got excelling, thriving, surviving, struggling, crisis. So when you find that you're in that struggling area where like stress feels like it's just starting to weigh up and it's just sort of teetering you over, if you're on like a seesaw, you're starting to shift towards that more negative headspace and you start to have like negative mental well-being. Okay, well, what I would recommend that people do so you don't shift and start moving towards crisis is just take a step back, thinking about what's going on in your life and actually using a journal to do this. So writing down all of your like worries, all of the stresses, okay, and then practicing the technique that we spoke about before, which is the like I am thinking or I am noticing, which allows us to shift from the thinking self, which is very reactive and can often only look at the problems, to more of the observed self, right? And the observed self can then look at an issue we're having and be a little bit more unbiased, almost like you're speaking to a friend on, well, what would you do if you were talking to a friend, right? And then we start going a little bit more solution focused. And again, it also offers you the opportunity to look at your life as a whole and think, okay, what is adding stress? What is taking away stress from me? Does that make sense?
100%. And again, it's reframing that from I am stressed because of, to I am feeling stressed because of. And when you reframe it like that, it feels like it is a manageable emotion, because instead of being a state of stress, you are having emotions or thoughts of being stressed. And ultimately, that's how you can manage from there. Journaling, obviously a really effective method. Yeah. I've definitely found benefit from it in past, and it's definitely something that I should be better at. But again, I'm not kind of one of these, I guess, online coach influencers that has this 10-step morning routine where I meditate for 3 hours and then journal and then do an ice bath and all of this kind of stuff. I just know that kind of I will have a bit of self-reflection when I'm out for my morning walk. So already I'm getting that natural sunlight. I'm getting a little bit of exercise in, just taking time for me outside of that very, very busy world. And then I kind of have a moment of self-reflection. And that's what works for me. So ultimately, guys, you are trying to find what works for you. So we definitely recommend taking some time away, whether that's to do some breath work, do a bit of journaling, get a walk in. All of these factors are really going to be key in helping you manage that long-term stress. I know for me that I'll have kind of a few non-negotiables throughout the week. So I try to get one morning where it's a slow morning. Typically that looks like on a Sunday morning for me, where I'm kind of not doing anything. And that really helps kind of recenter me for the week and being able to do that instead of just being go, go, go all the time. I'll try have at least a period throughout the week where I'm unplugged from my phone. Because again, that kind of like constant stimulation, not particularly good for our stress. And again, just doing one thing per week that's outside of work, outside of any of my other commitments, where I'm just taking time for me. And again, just knowing I have that thing to look forward to every single week is really, really crucial for me and helping me manage my long-term stress.
Yeah, and just on that topic, we started speaking a little bit around these well-being techniques you can use, and we speak about journaling a lot. You also mentioned people. You mentioned people talking about like perhaps stretching or like I'd coin it as like mindful movement or doing breath work. So we talk with sort of our grounding techniques, and the reason why they're so powerful as well, if you are someone that is feeling very stressed, and it's often something really good to do when you're winding down for sleep, is because when we're often very stressed, we are worrying about past or future, right? So we're worrying about what happened in the past and how that might impact us moving forwards, or we might be dwelling on a situation that wasn't very comfortable for us. Let's say that meeting that just didn't go very well in the day, or we're worrying about a meeting that's coming up, or an event that's coming up, or a race that's coming up. And what we're often doing is our mind is giving us these like what if thoughts. It's making us worry about the uncontrollables. But by doing a grounding technique, what we're actually doing is rather than telling our brain, like, don't worry about it or don't think about it, we're turning around to our mind, we're saying, actually focus on this. Does that make sense? So rather than saying, oh, don't think on that, don't think about that, what we're actually doing is we're overloading the brain with information and focusing on sensors that make us snap back to where we are, which is in the present, and just slows down and reduces the amount of thoughts that are like almost feel like they're like flying through our mind. Okay. And that's why stuff like breath work is so useful. Okay, because breath work does two things. Not only does it force your mind to have to think about the present and what it's actually doing, it's also slowing down the rhythm and your heartbeat and your breathing. Okay, which almost acts as that natural reset to, okay, slow down, come back to where I am, right? And just give yourself that, 2-3 minutes of respite. And suddenly you'll realize you feel a lot calmer. You can then choose, what you want to focus your attention onto afterwards. And acts as a nice way to just snap back into the present, reground. That's why it's called, grounding. You're regrounding yourself and you can move forward. Another one which is really good is doing some we call it mindful movement. And that's why tying it in with stretching before bed can be so powerful. So when you're doing your downwards dog or you're doing this, the child's pose, you're really trying to feel what muscle am I stretching? What does that feel like? Does it feel tight? Does it feel loose? Actually, is my calf a bit tighter because I did track last night? These sensations that make you be really present in where you are, which forces your mind to stop thinking about some of these, stressful moments of the day or stressful events that might be coming up.
100%. And just while you were talking that, again, breathfulness really, really helpful, like the box breathing technique, 4 seconds in, hold, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. Really, really great technique, something that I use as well. Also seen that when you do a double breath in through the nose, there's something psychologically that's happening there that instantly calms you. So again, if you are in a stressful situation, particularly in that moment, just take that double breath in through the nose. Going to be super helpful, getting you grounded. Again, silencing that chimp a little bit and getting more of like your logical thinking brain on. And again, one thing that you mentioned there is about the control element of stress. And when you are laid in bed and you're thinking about what ifs, this is an incredibly simplified model, but something that I've used for years and years is this really simple model that's just like, can I control the outcome of that event? And if the answer is yes, then do what you can to then have that impact on the outcome of that event. And if the answer to that question is no, if you can't control that event, then there's no need to stress about it because you can't physically control the outcome. And yes, that is incredibly simplified. It's not going to work for absolutely everything. I'm not saying once you start thinking about that, it's going to solve all your stress problems. But I remember so clearly there was one time at work where I fucked up to an incredible degree. And I was sat worrying about it probably for about half an hour. And then thought about this. I said, okay, what can I do to control this? Well, I can get in an hour before everyone else. I can do this. And that will have the most positive impacts as I can do. And then everything else is outside of my control. I remember it so clearly. And I was just like, right, okay, so that's the step that I can personally take. Once I've done that, everything else is outside of my control. So therefore, and that just took such a mental load off me. And I always remember that whenever I come up against something like that.
Yeah, it's good. There's two things that I was thinking about there as you're speaking, which is one, by focusing on controlling the controllables, you're naturally shifting your mind into problem focused to solution focused, which gives you that sense of control, which gives you that sense of empowerment, which is why you naturally feel relieved, because you feel like you've done something, you feel like you've almost solved, even if it's the smallest bit, you feel like you've solved a problem, right? So again, being a little bit solution focused when possible, always fantastic. The other thing there is also, and it's actually someone reminded me of it the other day, is doing this, it's called a downwards arrow technique. So if you have a problem, you almost do the opposite of what you're meant to do, which is you're like, okay, so then what? Right? And then you just keep saying, okay, well that happens, so then what? And once you eventually get to the bottom, you kind of end up realizing, well, it's going to be okay. It might be a bit shit, but eventually you're going to be okay. And you're going to have a solution, or if you have done a massive, for want of a better word, fuck up, right? Eventually it will work itself out, but you will also put yourself in a situation where you're going to be okay. And that's just such an easy way, and we call it the downwards arrow. So then you just literally, and someone can do it with you, and it ends up being quite annoying, where they just say, well, and then what, right? And then you keep following it, and you realize that actually what you've built up to be this huge thing of mind isn't going to be as bad as it seems. Like, you're going to be able to work it out, it will pass, and you'll be able to move on. And eventually, the classic, eventually you'll look back on it and be like, wow, no, like that felt massive then and there, but now look at me now.
That's it. Be that annoying 6-year-old child to yourself that's always asking why.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And hopefully some great tools there for how to manage your stress. We're going to have to very quickly go on this because, as we love to do, Tony, we love to go in depth on those bits. But the final thing we've got for this particular section of holistic health is all about purpose, which we spoke about before, so we won't absolutely labour the point. But in terms of everything kind of that we mentioned, and having that sense of that worth, where we're going to go, and realizing that in terms of managing our stress and having that sense of purpose and fulfilling who we need to be, it's super important for then how it links to all other aspects of our health.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about sense of purpose in relation to stress, right? When you know why you're doing something. So, for example, last night on the track, absolutely knackered, seconds to last rep, and I'm like, oh, do I really want to do this? And I'm like, no, I do, because I know the purpose and the why behind why I'm on that track, right? Small moment, small example, probably not relevant to everyone, right? But what I'm linking that to is, well, when we're looking at chronic stress and we're looking at everything that is why is this causing me stress? Why is this causing me that? Well, then we can start to prioritize, and we realize that actually perhaps we need to make some changes, because the thing that we're really stressed about isn't actually giving us a long-term purpose. It might be, helping us out for now, but actually when we look at our long-term overall goal, that thing that's causing me stress isn't serving me a deeper purpose in life. Therefore, I need to start making the decision of how can I remove that stress from my life.
Definitely. And I think in terms of this, it's, realizing that purpose doesn't have to be this grand thing. Like, not everybody wants to rule the world or whatever it is. So, and it's important as we link back to the values as a person. So your purpose in life might be to be the best parent that you want to be, might be to be a role model for other people, might be, as Tony says, to just get that next session done and prove to yourself that you can do that hard thing. So it doesn't have to be this grand thing. You don't have to be the best in your industry or whatever it is. But I think it's important that you have that, and then obviously every step that you take and those actions that you're working towards that person.
Yeah, definitely. And we know that when you have a purpose in life, it then relates to having increased mood, right? It decreases that it decreases that sort of unknowing feeling you have in you, where you feel like you're a little bit lost. So it gives you direction. I'm really conscious of not going into this too much. Otherwise, we're going to end up doing like another whole half an hour just on this topic. But yeah, the purpose, it builds you, gives you a direction. It actually will increase your joy of life and life expectancy. But additionally, it then allows you to start looking at the people you have around you as well.
Definitely. And then how this kind of looks or manifests itself in terms of a practical reflection of the week. So I think it's important to ask yourself, what gave me energy this week? What activities did I do that lit me up? Because obviously we want to do a lot more of those. And then on the flip side as well, it's important to ask yourself, what drains my energy this week? What interactions with these people? What did I do at work that just didn't light me up, that actually drained my energy instead of giving me? Because once you can start recognizing what gives you energy, what lights you up, what gives you that reason to keep going and keep pushing, obviously you can start doing more of those things, and then reducing the things that drain your energy, because we only have a certain amount. Everybody has a finite amount of willpower and energy and mental space that they have that they can dedicate during the time or during the day or week. So it's important that you realize, what is aligning me to my purpose in that regard. And that's a good framing. And you can kind of do this on a Sunday, Monday, whenever it is. Think about the previous week and then take those learnings into the following week.
Yeah, it's great. And that reflection of what's giving, what's taking away, or what's draining, it also allows you to look at what am I prioritizing in life. So I said I wanted to prioritize X, Y, and Z, but actually it turns out that Z, X, and Y was prioritized that week, right? So it's like, okay, actually I'm doing this wrong. I'm giving too much energy to the wrong areas. And sometimes you have to, and you can't control that, but it just offers you that opportunity to turn around, reflect, be a little bit honest with yourself and say, okay, I need to adjust here and there to make sure that I'm focusing on X, then Y, then Z, rather than Z, then Y, and then X. Yeah. Don't ask me to repeat the alphabet back. Yeah, and again, it's just that idea that, it's life is, unfortunately, a lot of it's give and take. But when you actually spend time thinking about it, you then realize, okay, I'm giving too much here. But equally, sometimes when you look at that deeper why, you're like, well, just for this next month or next 2 months, I do need to give a little bit more here, because it means that then long term I can give way more there. So also that, fills us with a little bit of motivation, can also often reduce that stress because you realize it's not forever. Look at the big picture, but that all comes from being able to take that step back, being able to quieten down the chimp, think logically, of course, be empathetic with yourself, but then look at that bigger picture model. And suddenly you're like, oh, okay, actually, it's been a really rubbish week, but this isn't going to be going on forever. I've got 4 more weeks of this, and then hopefully I'm into that more relaxed state because I've actually done the hard work, done the grind now, which means I can enjoy it more in the future.
Boom. I think that's the absolute perfect way to round off that section. And yeah, always finishing strongly. So we've spoken a lot about obviously, you could be hitting all the workouts in the world. You could be eating like an absolute champ, but if you're not managing your sleep, staying hydrated, managing your stress, and having that sense of purpose, it's kind of like, okay, well, in the temple, then those pillars are gonna ultimately bring everything down. Because again, if you think about it like scaffolding, if there's any loose points or loose bits in terms of our holistic health, then those are going to be letting us down. So hopefully you've taken away some practical bits there, and then to be thinking about holistic health. As always, we do love to finish with our closing questions. Tony, do you want to hit them with us this week?
Question number 1, am I chasing progress or am I actually taking care of myself?
So and I guess it's this thing. So I think if we look at this from an exercise point of view, again, just to use marathon training as a really clear example, is that are you training and are you pushing yourself towards this overall purpose? And for a lot of people, you'll be getting fitter, which is obviously one way that you are taking care of yourself. But actually, on the pursuit of these goals, if it's the overall goal, if you are overtraining, if you are undersleeping, if you are underfueling, and you actually come off worse, then potentially you are actually making yourself more unhealthy in this pursuit of this overall goal. So that's when we talk about the systems and talk about in terms of, are we taking care? Are we looking at all aspects of health rather than, yes, we might on paper be improving our running times and getting fit in this particular aspect, but are we getting healthy or are we compromising some of our other aspects? Are we feeling a lot more stressed in pursuit of this overall goal?
Yeah, brilliant. I was like wondering what the angle of that question is. Now you explained it. Fantastic question, Dan.
There you go.
No, and again, it all links back to that message, and of course, classic psychologists worrying about well-being, all links to that message of burnout, right? Are you actually just getting so locked in, but to the point where it's unhealthy that you're forgetting about all the other aspects of life? And it reminds me of the previous episode where you start thinking about, yes, this model in sport was an inspiration, this role model in sport was an inspiration to me, but do I want all of their life? And equally, am I chasing the same end goal as them? If I have a career and I've got family to think about, I'm not actually working as an elite athlete. It's just something, again, to reflect on and think about. Well, yes, it's fantastic. You might feel really locked in. You might be getting goals and progress in this area, but actually, are you going to end up doing that event feeling great for about 5 minutes and then realizing that you've lost a couple of friendships because you've been too focused and you've just left them by the wayside? Are you realizing that actually you need to now pick up all the slack that you left on your work, etc., right?
100%. Do you want to hit him with question number 2, or shall I take it from here?
Let's go. I've got it. Right. If my body could talk right now, what would it be asking for? Mine would probably be asking for an almond croissant.
It's getting to that point in the morning. But yeah, another great question. And again, it's like recognizing where potentially you are falling short in terms of that. Does your body need more recovery, more rest days throughout the week? Does it need more sleep? Does it need to be fueled better? Do you need more calories? So again, we can't obviously answer these questions for you, but just really important to ask yourself, what is it right now that you need? And that's a fluid thing. That's a dynamic. It's going to change from week to week, month to month. But kind of ask yourself on a regular basis, a couple of times a week, at the end of every week, whenever it is, what do I need right now in order to make sure that I'm, operating optimally?
Yeah, and it's a great one for you've woken up, you need to go, your training plan might turn around to you and say, I need to be doing this today, but you might have just had a heavy weekend, or you've had a really intense session the day before, or you've picked up a niggle and you do need to either take it easier and still do a workout, take it easier, or do like an active rest day, or just need to rest in general. That is fine. We're not saying do it all the time, because of course you're not going to progress, but just listen to the body. And again, I feel like we've ended up talking about burnout all this time, but again, you're stopping yourself from breaking down further, or especially now we're into the autumn winter period, you're stopping yourself from catching a cold or a flu, which will set you back way further than just a day that you're a little bit more calm on, that you're not taking it as intense.
100%.
All right. Final question is, do my daily actions align with the kind of life I say I want? Before you even start talking, like, this is a great question, something that I often will ask my clients personally, because it just links back to the values piece so nicely and links back to that purpose.
100%. And again, there's probably going to be, because we can be pulled from every direction in terms of our work life, our stresses, trying to just impress people. But ultimately, it comes back to this values, who you want to be, what is that purpose? And are you doing those things, or are you just saying yes to things because you don't want to say no? And it's important to ask yourself that question for sure.
Yeah, and it links back to that idea, there are multiple yous in everyone's mind. Right? The only one that matters is the you that you see when you're looking in the mirror. And I don't mean physically, that you see inside and externally when you look in the mirror.
Bosh. So as always, it's tradition on this podcast, we'll finish with a quote. It's my quote for this week. And again, I love this one. So, asking for help isn't giving up. It's actually refusing to give up. And I love this one because often when people get to the point where they are ready to ask for help, they're probably exhausted a lot of options themselves. Again, I know we've said it, word of the podcast, leading to this point of burnout a lot. And people often think like, okay, so I've tried to work this through myself, haven't quite been able to get there. Well, asking for help, I think, is a massive strength to be able to recognize that and go. And ultimately, if you're focused on becoming a better person and gaining that experience, is it really so bad to ask for someone else's expertise where they could have been doing this for many, many years in whatever area that you need support in? So actually, in the society where we think everybody has to have it figured out by themselves, and again, it's something that you preach absolutely through TWP is, nothing great is imagined alone. And again, it's like, if you want to go far, then go as a team, use other expertises. And I genuinely think that is not a weakness if you are asking for help or support, but it's a strength rather that you can rely on your network and you can use those connections. And ultimately, if you build experiences and you get results through doing that, then that is such a huge strength.
Bastard stole my lines. Literally, two things I was about to say there was, if you want to go far, go as a team, and nothing great is imagined alone. And I absolutely do love that second quote. Probably should actually use it. Well, can't now, we've spoiled it. But two fantastic quotes there, because it's just so powerful in terms of that. I still can't stand this idea that people feel like they have to suffer alone or suffer in silence because it makes them less than. When actually we know, especially when we link back to previous quotes, where having that difficult conversation ends up, helping you grow so much more. And it's that almost arrogance that you think you know better, or you think that no one else understands the situation that you're in. I can guarantee you, when you start speaking to people, I think, again, the power of social media is that, like, people are like, does anyone else get annoyed by this? And suddenly you realize that hundreds of people do, right? So it's that, you're not giving up. You're not saying that you're not good enough. You're just saying that actually, in order for me to reach this goal, I need to reach out so that I can then step forwards.
100%. So don't ever diminish the value in asking for help and relying on your network and other people's experience, because it's so unbelievably important.
100%. Well, Dave, I think we've yet again gone flying past our goal of a quick 30-minute boom episode, just because I think this ended up being one of my favorite ones. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in and for listening. I know that I've really enjoyed this. I even learned some bits today from Dave, which has been fantastic. Just shows, what is it? You learn something new every day, which is great. But thanks for joining us, guys. Please, like, comment, subscribe, all that lovely stuff. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Next episode is going to be a banger. Make sure you listen.
Cheers.